So we are broadcasting right now. So right now we'd be live, whatever.
Fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. You sound a little bit muffled, Antonio, or is it just you guys? Or does he sound a little muffled, or you can
It does sound muffled.
Uh-oh. Really?
Yeah.
Should I not use my headset?
It sounds better. It sounds better now.
It's probably the position of the speaker.
Could be. But I've also been having a lot of trouble with my internet. It's been very spotty.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it'll be all right. So one of the panelists had their hand up for a second. I mean, one of the attendees.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't see it up right now.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're up to 8 attendees. Let me see. You know what? Let me start. Okay. All right. So I started the recording software. So I guess if it's okay with you guys, we'll get started.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this virtual scoping meeting. Tonight we'll be discussing and taking comments and your feedback on what should be studied for this for the Catalina Village project for the EIR. So just real quick, before the remainder of the staff takes over, I'm Lena Porlesi. I'm the analyst with the Planning Division, and so just some virtual calls for tonight. It will be a presentation of the project and what an EIR is and what it studies as part of a project. So that will be presented by city staff and by the consultants preparing the EIR. So that'll take about 30 minutes or so tonight. And then we follow up with attendee comments. So it's at that time anyone in attendance can then ask their questions or provide their comments to us. So there's 2 ways you can do that. You can use the raise hand function, and we'll go through one by one and ask you to to unmute yourselves and then ask your question or make your comment. Or you can also utilize the chat function. And then with the chat function, staff will review the chats as they come in, any questions or comments through there. And then we can answer to those as well. Or we can also take it if you want to provide a comment through the chat, that the chat does become part of the record, and we do save those. So you can actually provide your comment through the chat as well. So with that, I will turn it over to our staff.
Thank you, Lena, for that intro. So wanted to briefly introduce me and the other staff that are here tonight. So my name is Antonio Gardea, and I want to go ahead and welcome you to the scoping meeting for the proposed project at 100 through 132 North Catalina Avenue. The purpose of tonight's meeting, again, is to solicit input from the community regarding the proposed project. So tonight, we have city staff. It's me, Lena Porlesi, Stacy Kinsella, and planning manager Sean Scully, who's in the background. You won't see him. We have also with us the city's CEQA consultant, Suzanne Huerta from Rincon Consultants, as well as Michael Kennedy representing the transportation engineering subconsultant, Farron Pierce. I'll provide an overview of the project and then hand it off to Suzanne to go over the CEQA process and the timeline. But again, tonight we're just gathering information from the community, and specifically in terms of what the potential environmental effects of the project may be and what should be studied in the initial study in the EIR. So first, a little bit of background with the project site. The project site is approximately 1.2 acres in size. It spans 6 parcels. It's really a total of 14 lots on the east side of North Catalina Avenue between Diamond and Emerald. The site is zoned for low-density, multifamily residential development, but it's developed with 5 non-residential buildings and a shed. These are non-conforming uses, or in other words, they're legacy or grandfathered properties. And today they're used as retail shops, dry cleaners, and up until a few years ago was the Catalina coffee. Collectively, the buildings are representative of various stages of the city's history, but in particular, the building at 132 North Catalina was used as a rail car repair facility. And the two-story building where the picture frame store is at, that was originally designed as the Masonic Lodge, which is one of the many important social groups that played a large role in the city's early history. So the project is going to involve the demolition of the building at 116 North Catalina Avenue, which is the single-story cabinet shop, as well as removal of the shed at the rear. The three other buildings would also be partially demolished, and those are the dry cleaners and the Catalina coffee location. And those are going to be used as a snack shop and, for the, kind of a similar purpose. And, but a large portion of that building would be demolished. The former blacksmith shop would also be rehabbed, and a portion of that building would be removed. And that's anticipated to be a beer tasting room. That's kind of what the applicant envisions for that space. And then there would be a space in between those two that would be kind of like outdoor dining seating areas. The Masonic Lodge building would be rehabbed. A portion of the back of it would be removed, but it would be adaptively reused as 4 housing units. And the parking lot immediately to the south would be developed also with 4 units. In total, 30 new residences are proposed. And they're proposed to be affordable, some affordable units included within. So there are a number of land use entitlements that will be considered by the Preservation Commission and Planning Commission, as the project involves consideration of, formation of a historic district and removal of one of the contributing structures to the historic district, which is the cabinet shop. The Preservation Commission is going to also consider the alteration of the existing buildings, including the facade rehab of the Masonic Lodge building, and that's all covered under the Certificate of Appropriateness. The Preservation Commission, as part of the whole project, will also make a recommendation on a parking variance related to the adaptive reuse of the buildings because they are more intense than what is occurring there today. That's just a recommendation. The Planning Commission has the ultimate authority on the variance, and they would be considering that part of it as part of the larger group of entitlements. And that includes the conditional use permit, design review for the project, and the tentative map. Again, as part of the project, there is a density bonus that's being requested because the underlying density only allows for 22 units. 4 of those 22 units are proposed to be affordable to very low income households. And this enables up to a 50% density bonus for the site. Now, the project proponent isn't requesting that, they're requesting 35% density bonus. Along with that, the applicant is requesting 3 incentives or concessions in terms of waiving some development standards to facilitate the development of the project. These incentives include mixed use zoning for adaptive reuse of the 3 buildings and consolidation of the lots, which are greater than 5,000 square feet and more than 100 feet wide. The last incentive is to be able to develop 3-story residential structures. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Suzanne, who will talk more in detail about the CEQA process and where we are at this point.
Thank you, Antonio. So as Antonio said, my name is Suzanne Huerta. I'm the project manager for the preparation of the environmental impact report. I'll provide an overview of the EIR process and a summary of the impact analysis that we are preparing. So overall, the purpose of this EIR scoping meeting is to present the EIR process to the public in order for us to get your input on the environmental issues that we should include in the EIR. So after our presentation, we will be taking your comments. So the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, establishes the EIR process. The purpose of CEQA is to disclose the significant environmental impacts of a project to the public and to decision makers. We also identify ways to avoid or reduce environmental impacts through mitigation measures and also through the development of alternatives to the project. And we're also here to enhance public participation in the planning and environmental review process. So this is an overview of the CEQA process for an EIR. It begins with distribution of the notice of preparation and the 30-day scoping period, which is where we are at now. And we are at the beginning of, and we're also preparing the draft EIR. When the draft EIR is complete, we will circulate the EIR to the public, and at the same time, we will file the notice of availability to the county clerk and to the state clearinghouse. And there will be a 45-day public review period, during which time the public will can provide their comments on the EIR. We'll then prepare a final EIR with responses to the public comments, and then the project will be reviewed by the city for a final decision. And once the decision is made, we will file the notice of determination with the county clerk. So these are the issue areas that we are required to study under CEQA. These are 20 issue areas listed here. We have prepared an initial study, which is available on the city's website. That's done a review of analysis of each of these issue areas. Based on this analysis, we found that there are potentially significant impacts associated with air quality, biological resources, cultural and tribal cultural resources, geology and soils, hazardous materials, noise, and transportation. So all of those issue areas will be analyzed in detail in the EIR. So we analyzed the impacts associated with the project based on the CEQA guidelines and thresholds that are developed under CEQA. We provide the setting for the existing conditions, which also is referred to as the baseline conditions. And we determine if impacts will be below the significance thresholds that are under the CEQA guidelines. If significant impacts are anticipated, we consider mitigation measures that will reduce the impacts to a less than significant level. But some impacts may be significant and unavoidable. So in those cases, the decision makers would have to determine if the benefits of the project outweigh the significant and unavoidable impacts. We also have to look at a few other issues that need to be addressed. Cumulative impacts is one of them. That's the incremental impact of the project when added to other projects that are either pending or anticipated in the reasonably foreseeable future. The individual impacts of the project may be less than significant, but they can be considered cumulatively significant when paired with other projects. So that's why we are required to also analyze cumulative impacts. Growth-inducing impacts are also discussed, and we will discuss the ways in which the project may foster growth in the city. And we also are required to look at a reasonable range of alternatives. We'll look at up to 3 alternatives to the project, including a no project alternative. And alternatives will also be determined based on the EIR analysis. If we find that there's a significant impact, we we will try to address that impact by proposing an alternative project. And we will also consider any alternatives that may be suggested during this scoping period. So based on our analysis of the initial study, we found that there are potentially significant impacts, as I had mentioned, in the list of the eight issue areas. So here are some of the primary issues of concern that we've come across. So during construction of a project, there are short-term air quality emissions and noise that can be generated from construction activities. So we will analyze those potential impacts, as well as any long-term air quality and noise impacts during operation of the project. These impacts will be quantified using emissions and noise models to estimate the level of impact, and we may require mitigation measures to reduce the potential impacts. The EIR will also include a historic analysis because 2 of the buildings on the project site are eligible as individual landmarks and 4 are eligible as contributors to a historic district. So there is a standalone historic analysis that we are reviewing and incorporating into our analysis in the EIR. Also, portion of the site are located in areas where hazardous materials were once used. So the project includes remediation of the site, as well as demolition of structures that may contain asbestos or lead-based paint. So the EIR will analyze the proposed remediation and demolition activities to ensure that the project won't expose the public to hazardous conditions. There's also potential transportation impacts that were found to be potentially significant. So Michael from Fair & Pierce will provide an overview of the transportation analysis.
Thank you, Suzanne. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to just speak to the 2 primary metrics that we'll be looking at for the project in the evaluation of its potential effects. And want to focus on this in particular because this is one of the first projects that will be undergoing a vehicle miles traveled impact analysis in the city. And this is due to changes at the state level. So a law called Senate Bill 743 was implemented, and it requires all projects to no longer use the level of service to evaluate a project's transportation impacts under CEQA effective July 1st, 2020. Now, level of service is the evaluation of intersections and how they perform, and that will also be conducted for this project, but that's going to be done in a separate report. So the City of Redondo Beach can and will continue to require level of service studies outside of the CEQA process. The goal of the state to shift to this look at vehicle miles traveled is to really orient CEQA level analyses and the potential impacts of projects to help facilitate the state's goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So the amount that people drive is really corresponds with the level of emissions that occur, and reducing the overall level of driving will help to achieve the state's goals, which also includes the development of multimodal transportation networks, so options aside from just driving alone, as well as the diversity of land uses. So as I said, the project will be evaluated both under this vehicle miles traveled framework, as well as a level of service. And in terms of the VMT analysis, the city is in the process of implementing its guidelines, but the city council did approve those in concept late in 2020. So the studies for this project will be prepared in accordance with that. So in the next slide, I'll just compare the 2 different metrics. So under level of service, this is really a measure of delay and the effects on drivers. So the amount of congestion that a driver would experience waiting at an intersection. Under VMT, it's really meant to be an evaluation of the overall environmental effects of driving, which is including both trips and how far you drive and the resulting emissions. Under level of service, project impact would be most sensitive to the capacity of intersections adjacent to the project, the number of trips a project would add to that intersection. And typically, the bigger project will generate a bigger significant impact. Under VMT, it's sensitive to the context, but that's also the land use context, the transit context, opportunities to walk or bike. And so a project could actually be a larger project, but be more VMT efficient because it's taking advantage of the opportunities in the surrounding community. And so therefore is generating less vehicle miles traveled on a per capita basis, which is how it's often measured. In terms of mitigations under level of service, typically is widening the road, adding turn lanes, which tend to not be easily implementable or feasible in a more built out community like Redondo Beach. Whereas under a VMT metric, things that involve overall reducing the amount of travel, we call this transportation demand management. So it could be ongoing efforts such as subsidizing transit passes or various means to encourage carpooling, for example. So these will both be evaluated for the projects. So there will be a separate level of service report, which will be very consistent with what's been done for years in the city for projects, as well as a CEQA transportation impacts report, which will primarily be focusing on vehicle miles traveled.
Thank you, Michael. So this is the preliminary schedule for the EIR. As I mentioned, we've circulated the notice of preparation, and we are in the scoping period now. The scoping period began on March 25th and will end on March 26th. Just to note that typically the scoping period is 30 days, but because City Hall is closed on April 23rd, the scoping period was extended to 33 days. So the close of the comment period is April 26th. We are currently preparing the draft EIR, and we anticipate completing that around May. And then the EIR will go out for public review. It's a 45-day public review period, so that'll be May to June. We anticipate the final EIR will be ready with response to comments in July, and public hearings will be around August or September, through September. And also that's when the project is decided on, that's when we will file the notice of determination. So just to reiterate that the purpose of tonight's meeting is to get the public's comments on the proposed project. While we will take note of your comments tonight, please also provide any written comments. Any comments you have written so that they can be part of the public notice. You can send them to Antonio at 415 Diamond Street, or you can send them to his email address at antonio.gardea@redondo.org. As I said, the city will be accepting comments through April 26th. So at this point, we can now receive any comments that you have on the project.
Thank you, Suzanne, for that very thorough overview of the process. So at this point, that concludes the staff's presentation. We invite you to raise your hand, and so we can start taking public comment. So the first one that I saw was Jim Hammond. Lena, can you help with maybe?
Yes. Yeah. So let me click. So what I'll need to do for each person is I'll need to click on allow to talk. So Jim, I think you can unmute now and go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity. By the way, I'm Jim Hannon, as you heard, and I live across the street from the project, so catty corner, and live in Seascape 3. By the way, I asked the president of our HOA to join us today because this project really affects us in many ways. And I've lived at this project for 40 years. I've lived across the street from this project for 40 years. So I've seen it develop into a very wonderful coffee shop at one point that was very walkable, bikeable, is supported by the community on the west side of Catalina, where we have over 1,000 residents that live there. So, it was a big impact to us when it closed down. And then we had some concerns as what the build out might look like. One of the things that I do have a history with it, when the prior owner that owned Catalina Coffee took me into the building that was north of it on the other side of the parking lot, and I had an opportunity to look at the inside of that building. From the outside, it's absolutely hideous, but the inside was amazing to me. It was, in fact, a machine shop that had all these conveyor belts that were in the rafters, and it was obviously at one point part of this machine shop, they had drop hammers and other big devices in there to be able to maintain the red car. So it was very historical to me. I was absolutely amazed at how beautiful it was when you got inside, because you went from the outside that was so ugly to the inside that was just mesmerizing. But anyway, I was kind of hoping that we might see some restoration on that. I don't know if there's enough definition. By the way, Andrea, I had a little fuzziness on some of the voices, so I wasn't sure I captured everything that was said. And I apologize if I'm repeating something you already said. But anyway, I guess from our standpoint, I actually at that time was president of a bicycle club that was about 700 members, and we used to stop there on Saturdays and Sundays and park our bikes, and we had plenty of parking with the fence around it. And I think we were probably one of the biggest supporters in the area of that. So when we lost that, we lost a social area that we really missed over the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm hoping that maybe we can regain part of that. Again, this is a very walking and biking community, and I appreciated the sensitivity I heard when it comes to transportation. I suspect that probably most of the people on the west side, if it's comparable to even what we had, will be supporting it. Like I said earlier, there's over 1,000 people. In the east side, maybe not quite as dense, but I'm sure they'll support it too. So I'm very happy to see. The original building, as we all know, it goes back into the 50s, was a dry cleaners. It was an Art Deco design. And I know the rendering that we saw, it wasn't an exact match, but it did have, did resemble it. Hopefully they'll have the glass that kind of tapers down and some of the other things that really made it special, and that, it was a special place to visit in the neighborhood, and I think it would be good for business. I was wondering too, it refers to tasting room. Is that interesting enough? I was talking to the prior owner about maybe having a wine tasting there. So when I saw that, I wasn't quite sure what that represents, but maybe you could explain that to me. The other things, I know that you've got the 112 building, which is a 2 or 3 story high building, and it was my understanding that may be a rooms for rent or something. Was that did I misunderstand that? But maybe you could explain a little bit more about that to me. But all in all, we're excited for the project. We're welcoming. I think it would be an enhancement of certainly what we have today. And I think the community will support it. Hopefully we'll have enough of the old Catalina coffee there and enough of the old buildings that will be a real draw and for the neighborhood. So anyway, that's all I had. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment, Jim. So I just wanted you asked a couple questions about the uses there. And one is proposed to be a beer tasting room. and that requires a conditional use permit. And so that is subject to review and approval by the Planning Commission. That's one of the items that needs to be reviewed by them. Again, they're looking at the entirety of the project. So that's one portion of it. We've encouraged the applicant to go ahead and move forward with that as part of the package. They were going to defer those entitlements till later, but we think that it's a better idea to just go ahead and anticipate all the different uses that would go in there and have like a master entitlement for everything. The other thing that requires a conditional use permit is that open kind of dining area in between those two buildings, the old blacksmith shop and the former Catalina coffee location, because it is an area that's over 150 square feet in size. And so we have to analyze that as well. And so that's all part of that project. As far as the old Mason's Lodge, it used to also be at the post office at one point. That building, the facade will be rehabbed. So there's going to be some changes to the front of the building to kind of restore it to what it used to look like, more in keeping with the original architecture. But that's going to be, the inside will be adaptively reused. It is essentially 3 stories inside, and it's going to be adaptively reused for 4 rental units. Mind you, the entirety of the project will all be rental units with a variety of, pretty large units with a number of bedrooms. So that's all part of the project description, and I hope that clarifies a little bit more of what the intention is for those uses. The applicant does have a keen interest in keeping the Catalina coffee, the architecture, and keeping the interior of the blacksmith shop as much as possible, because he recognizes that that's an important part of the city's history. With that, I hope that answered the questions. I know that John Katnick is also, he's got his hand raised and wants to comment. Can you help with that, Lena?
Yes, yeah. So go ahead, John. You should be unmuted now.
Yeah, hi. My name is John Katnick, and I own a property directly north of the subject property at 136 North Catalina, which is a building that was built in 1937, and also a building at 116 South Catalina, which is an historic building that was built pre-1906. I guess my question is, I love the project, and I think it's really important that the city keeps the historic buildings that are on the property. Especially, I've been in the 2 buildings that Jim has been in, the Catalina Coffee and the shop next door to mine, and it's amazing inside, and I agree with him. It should be preserved. The one question I do have, being a neighbor to the north, is there going to be any additional parking that could benefit some of the neighbors that own businesses in the area that will provide additional parking for some of the other businesses? And again, I do support the project the way it looks. I think it's really beautiful, and I think the area really needs a lift. Ever since the Catalina Coffee went out of business, it's really kind of gone downhill in that block. So I'm in full support, and I really appreciate the Redondo Beach staff and what you guys are doing. You guys really presented it really well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. So you highlighted that there are some pretty, nice buildings. There's historic buildings, I should say, potentially historic buildings. The applicant is looking to preserve portions of those, although as far as like the Catalina Coffee and the dry cleaners, big portions of those buildings, the rear portions, are going to be removed to make way for the residential development. As far as the parking goes, they are seeking a parking variance. Now they're going to have, I can't remember the specific number. It's somewhere in the range of like 20 some odd spaces on site that are going to be available for the commercial uses. But they will be closing some curb cuts, so that will enable us to have more on-street parking available, and hopefully that'll help with relieve some of the parking crunch on the street there. And they are very interested in having bicycle racks, because they are aware of the community that used to use Catalina coffee. The developer recognizes that and wants to welcome folks that to be able to ride their bikes to the commercial portion of the project. But they, like I said, this is a substantial intensification of the use. They're going to be removing the existing parking areas, the surface parking areas, in particular in the back, to develop the 30 units. Well, not all 30, but a larger portion of the 30 units in the back, behind the commercial buildings. I see a question here in the chat regarding underground parking slated for the condos and apartments. So there is not subterranean parking proposed for this project. The project is all rental. None of the project is going to be for sale units, and that's one of the things that was one of the objectives of the developer, is to try and reduce costs, and doing a subterranean structure would be a significant cost burden to them. They are complying with the residential parking standards, but for the commercial component, it is a substantial parking reduction from what is there today, and that's one of the pieces that will have to be considered by the Preservation Commission and the Planning Commission. They would need to apply for this variance to adaptively reuse those structures, because they're just a less intense use now. Let's see. Let's see, I have another question here. 30 rental, how many parking spots will be built? Total of 66 parking spaces. The parking requirement for the residences is 2 parking spaces per unit, and then you have guest parking spaces that are required, and they comply with that. But there's also surface parking that is just going to be available for the commercial structures. And I'm wondering, Suzanne, is there a way that we can show the site plan on the slides? You'll be able to see the layout, and that will give you a better idea of how, what I'm talking about here as far as the circulation. One too far. There we go. So that's the one. So at the very northern end, you'll see there's a driveway around the blacksmith shop, and that's gonna there's gonna be some parking along that side, and then as you loop around, that's actually a fire road, and you'll have some surface parking there in that notch out, and then there's going to be parking behind the Masons Lodge, which is further to the south, and then that driveway there to the immediate north of the Masons Lodge, between that and the dry cleaners. There's a building there today. That building will be removed in order to accommodate these parking spaces you see out there, as well as this driveway. There are, like I said, there are some curb cuts on the street. Those will be closed, so that'll enable us to capture some on-street parking in addition to what's available on site. Yes. So it is very important to provide adequate parking for the businesses as well as the residents. That we recognize that. That was something that we impressed upon the developer, that we want to make sure that there's adequate parking because we want these businesses to be successful. And we know that despite the fact that many people may walk or bike to the location, some people will want to drive there. And we want to make sure that we have adequate parking so that people who do want to drive there, be it from hopefully from shorter distances, will have a place to park. In addition to the on-street parking.
If there's anyone else, you can raise your hand or type into the chat. Or here we go.
So 22 townhomes, 30 units are short-term rentals. No, so the underlying or the base density that's allowed for a site of this size is 22 units, with 4 affordable housing units to very low-income households. They're entitled to a 50% density bonus. And so that gets them up to the 30 units. The units are going to be all rentals, but we don't permit or allow short-term rentals in the city. So that's that's not an allowed use, and that's not what this is being entitled for. So let's see, so units are 5 bedrooms. Yes, that is one of the concerns that we have, that staff has, is the number of bedrooms. It's a lot of the units are 5 bedrooms. There's a couple of buildings which are a couple of the units are going to be 6 bedrooms. Some are going to be 7 bedrooms. Some of these they're at the different levels. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're all going to be used as bedrooms. They could, very well be used as an office space or something else for the household. A lot of people are working from home right now and using, one of the spare bedrooms or spare rooms in a house as their office space. And we're anticipating that that's probably going to continue. But some of these bedrooms are rather small. But that is a concern because not all gets written into the analysis, the traffic analysis and trip generation, but it is something that has caught the attention of staff. Let's see, any other questions?
Let's see. So Jim?
Yeah, ingress, egress on Catalina. I know this is can be an issue for cyclists, especially. I know we see this in some of the restaurants and things on Harbor Drive where there's, we've got a large number of cars trying to get into the restaurants, and we've got a large number of bicyclists that are riding on the bike lane. So I think we need to really look at this. I was kind of hoping that it might have an ingress egress at the south end, closer to Emerald, and but when they're coming in and going out on Catalina, I'm sure that's going to be very congested, especially some of the busy summer days we have that everybody's out there riding their bike. Might have to consider that, maybe some mitigation in that area.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the comment. There actually are going to be, there's 2 driveways right at for the corner property on Emerald. Those 2 driveways are going to remain. So there's going to be 3 ingress and egress points along Catalina and 1 point of ingress egress on Emerald. And right now it's a one-way driveway in from Emerald, so in on Emerald, out on Catalina. But those are going to be remaining, and just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you.
Don't see. Here's another question. So a concern about noise. They are going to be rentals. Let's see, not for sale units. And that's one of the things that we will be looking at. They do have some amenity decks or like roof decks, and we would try to make sure that we incorporate ways to baffle or mitigate for potential noise.
If I can just add to that a little bit, if we, like I said, we are going to be, like Antonio said, we are going to be analyzing noise impacts. So we specifically will model the distance between the existing sensitive receptors, including existing homes, to see if there would be any impacts that would exceed city's thresholds. So if there's that possibility, we may include mitigation measures to try and help with noise effects.
All right. So see, there's a second comment about noise from the tenants. And then if there's an entity that will be monitoring the multifamily use in each of the units. Not sure what the question is specifically, but from what I understand, the applicant will be having a management company handle the leasing and ongoing like maintenance and those types of things, concerns from tenants from this project. So we will have that. Because there is a density bonus being requested, and 4 of the units are intended to be for low-income households, there is a contract that the developer will be entering in with the city to keep those affordable for a specified period of time. Typically, it's 35 years. Sometimes it could be longer. It could be as long as 55 years. But those are, we are going to have a contract to keep the 4 of the apartments as part of the affordability agreement. Okay. Let's see. So I think that covers that.
So if there's any other questions, or again, do your raise hand function, or otherwise, I think maybe, or here we go, John. Okay. Let's see. Hey, John. There you go.
Yes, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. So if everything goes well with the approval process, I'm a little concerned about the amount of number of units, but I mean, if everything goes well with the approval process, what would be the earliest that this project could possibly start?
Well, that's difficult to say because we don't control that part of the project. Once it's entitled, they could turn right around and submit for the plan check for the building permits. There are going to be several permits that are going to be issued, and those take anywhere between 2 months to 3 months to actually get planning corrections to them, feedback, and then before we can actually issue the permits. There's also remediation for some of the hazardous materials, and that could take a long time before they're able to demolish the buildings. So it's hard for me to give you a definitive timeline of when that would occur, because some of that is under the purview of Los Angeles County Fire for the hazardous mitigation, that plan. They've reviewed it, and it's approved in concept, but we don't know exactly how long those remediation efforts will take till they get a clearance letter. But the anticipation is that sometime late this year, next year, they'll get started on that work. And the last time that we spoke, it was somewhere, I wanted to say that they wanted to go ahead and open by, or have some of the projects built, a portion of the project built by the end of next year. And maybe, Suzanne, is that something that we can talk about as far as like construction schedule, or because I think we look at that as part of air quality. There might be more to disclose in the EIR with the construction schedule.
Yeah. We're as part of the emissions, air quality emissions analysis, we'll get the construction schedule, and that'll be part of the project description. So we will have more, in the EIR will have more details about construction timing.
Thank you, Suzanne. So I think we're kind of winding down. So again, we want to reiterate, if you think of anything else that you want to make us be aware of, you can send an email to me. My email is antonio.gardea@redondo.org, and we'll be happy to include or take a look at anything else that you may have thought of that we didn't already talk about tonight. I think that wraps it up. But one last chance, anybody else?
Yeah. What we'll do too is, since everyone's signed up, we'll have you like on an email list for any future notifications. We'll send you an email with a link to this project webpage. We can post tonight's PowerPoint on that webpage. We can post a direct link to Antonio's email address on that webpage. So if you think now, once you've absorbed everything and you think of any other issues you'd like to see looked at and addressed in the EIR or expanded on, just go ahead and send those comments over. We're taking them all the way through April 26th. Send them to Antonio, either by mail to the City Hall address or to the email. But we'll shoot out an email before by weekend, by the weekend, that has a link to this webpage with the information you need.
Okay. And again, wanted to thank everybody for coming out virtually tonight and participating and listening to our presentation. And we look forward to having you participate and comment once we do launch the public hearings for this project. I think your input is invaluable to the process. I'm glad that you've taken an interest in this project, and I hope to hear from you virtually or not. Maybe things will be ready in the near future here for reopening and all that. But again, I appreciate you coming and setting aside some time to hear about the project and provide comment.